Hello and welcome to another edition of The Extra Point. I am Kendall Gammon, and I am now joined by my longtime teammate and good friend, Eric Hicks. Eric, first of all, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, Kendall. Always good to be with you.
I appreciate it. You know what, you and I go back a long ways. I came to the Chiefs in 2000. I think you'd been here a few years before then. You know, it's interesting. I wrote about it in my book, but I mean, there were several years where we carpooled to the airport. And yes, NFL players do carpool to the airport, but really, really good times, good friendships, a lot of high times, a lot of low times when you're dealing with everything. You got training camp when you're away. You played how many years in the league? Remind me.
10 years.
10, okay. That's what I was thinking, 10 years in the league. So a lot of people grew up, a lot of kids grew up wanting to be a professional athlete or were having some big dreams. I imagine that was maybe at some point yours. It certainly was mine. I'm just curious. I think people would be interested to know just in general what your thought process was going through high school and up into college at Maryland. Fear the Turtles. Fear the Turtles, absolutely. And then coming into the league. Just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I kind of grew up in the crucible of football, if you will, and you played several years there in Pittsburgh. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, so Western Pennsylvania, where most of the Hall of Fame quarterbacks are from. Not Erie, but in that part of the world. Of course, I grew up with dreams of playing for the Steelers. Either a Steelers fan, a Bills, or the Browns.
Right.
But I always wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Didn't know if that was an exact dream. I didn't grow to be a giant human being until in high school. And I was really only recruited by one Division I school, and that was Maryland. So I didn't know my prospects, didn't know what I was really getting into, but went down and had a good experience. And you know, all these years later, I'm here.
It is amazing when you think about it, all the things that have to go right. I mean, I've always said, you know, even with ability, things kind of have to fall into a place a little bit, but they say, you know, be prepared, preparation, take advantage of your opportunity, which I'm sure you did. Was there a time once you got to Maryland? Well, first of all, so that's the only place you're recruited by. So I don't know if it was a little intimidation, but it certainly had to be like, okay, do I belong here? Do I not? Was there some? What was your thought process back then?
Well, of course, you go from high school where you're the guy and you're the biggest one in town. And I actually played middle linebacker in high school at 6'6". I've been this tall since I was 16.
I did not know that.
Right. Yeah. So I knew I was going to make a position change. They had told me when they recruited me, and I was ready to do that. But of course, you're going down to Washington, D.C., a kid from a small town in Pennsylvania for the first time. Really not knowing what you're going to get into. But I had a really good experience from day one.
Okay, say at Maryland, while you're there and you're playing, was there a certain point where you started having some success and you're like, okay, I might be able to do this at another level?
Well, I started as a true freshman.
Okay.
We ended up having some injuries. We, of course, had to play teams like Florida State, who were pretty good back then.
Absolutely.
Even Clemson, North Carolina.
Wow.
Who have obviously resurged now, but were also very good back then. You know, I kind of went on steady through my career. Okay. And I can remember my first game when I was a true freshman at Clemson, the first time I ever heard the roar of a crowd after we threw an interception, 81,000 people. And I said, is this for me?
Right.
And I can also remember that year going to University of North Carolina and playing and getting my butt handed to me pretty good.
Right.
And I had moderate success as a freshman. Like I said, as the years went on, I played more, ended up being a team captain my senior year. I was told maybe a 7th round draft pick, something in that range. I was a team captain my senior year. But you know, I certainly would have never dreamed about all this.
Yeah, so let's go back to that North Carolina when you said you got kind of the crap knocked out of you, whatever. A lot of success, I think, is, number one, being able to put your hat in the ring and not being afraid to fail, but then understanding when you do fail, I think it's that ability to get up and go after it again with the same vigorous attitude. Talk about that. I mean, because I remember working out with you in the off season. I mean, you were full speed. I mean, there was no idle or choke. It was just the full throttle. And just kind of talk about that in terms of the mindset of what got you there, but probably more so even, you know, when you had setbacks.
Well, I don't want to say I escaped Erie, Pennsylvania, but it is a steel belt town where, Love left the place a long time ago with a lot of the jobs and things like that. So I knew I definitely didn't want to return there. Definitely felt I'd have a lot more prospects being in the Washington, D.C. area and getting a criminal justice degree. Was going to try to move into a government job as a U.S. Marshal or something like that. But it was intimidating coming out here. As you knew me, I can always run like the wind.
You can run.
But I was skinny. I was really skinny. In the NFL, tall, skinny guys don't really last.
Right. You become a tweener. You were a little bit of a tweener for a while.
Right. Especially back then when they ran the ball a lot more. They probably ran the ball 65% of the time back then, where it's probably vice versa or even more these days. So I ended up gaining 35 pounds that offseason from 1998 to 1999.
Wow.
And the secret to it was drink a gallon of vitamin D milk a day.
Wow. So the calorie count was high.
Very high. Also
it was real and it was spectacular.
It was spectacular.
Yes.
We always have
you can text us and figure out which one that one's from.
Always have our movie quotes.
Yes.
Our movie quotes ready to go. But my real chance came. Also, my wife was pregnant with our daughter Shayla. And you can gain that sympathy weight too, I guess, which it just ended up working out in my favor. But my real chance came on a random morning in River Falls, Wisconsin in 1999. And our starting defensive end, John Browning, who also ended up having a long career, was our teammate for a long time, very successful career. He tore his Achilles in morning practice. And Kurt Schottenheimer, who was Marty Schottenheimer's brother, who was the defensive coordinator, was just looking for somebody, and he turned and said, "Hicks, get in there."
Wow.
And then, that kind of stayed.
If that's not a true a true story and a true example of take advantage of your opportunity and be prepared for your situation, because I imagine, I have no doubt that you were prepping all the time, working out, but lots of times that doesn't happen. I would say there's more than a few people who've come in and out of the league who probably could have stayed a decade, but they never got the chance to really show what was going on.
Right. And I was doing a little bit of extra motivation, obviously, back then. A lot of people don't probably even remember the story. It was so long ago now with my daughter being very sick. Right. Well, with her heart problems. And you know what, Kendall? At that point, I could have really cared less about football. I needed health insurance. And I was able to, perform pretty well when they first started me in preseason games. And I think my really poignant moment of that preseason was we went down to Jacksonville and played, obviously, against the Jaguars, and I had to play against Leon Searcy, who I believe was
he was a teammate of mine.
One of your teammates.
Some of the heaviest hands I've ever
been around. Also the meanest person, probably. And it was him and Tony Baselli as the tackles.
Wow. And
I ended up getting Leon pretty good that night. Had like 6 quarterback hits to the point where they had to take Mark Brunell out of the game.
Nice.
So
while
all that was going on, I was able to maintain that success.
Wow.
Not out of selfishness, out of need. Out of that point. But, the rest is history, I guess.
So I want to unpack that a little bit. Not many people know. You mentioned it with Shayla and the heart condition. I had 2 boys that were in NICU at birth, had multiple surgeries, were there for 2 weeks. Yours lasted much longer and went on up as she grew, and thankfully is fine. She's a beautiful young lady now.
She's just with me at the game.
That's awesome. You were just at the game and last evening. And can you talk about the mindset that you had with that? And you said you're fighting for insurance, you're fighting to take care of your family.
Right.
It really becomes a little bit of a difficult thing because when you're out there on the field, while that's what you're fighting for, from my standpoint anyhow, if I didn't concentrate completely on what I was doing at the moment and take my family life and my personal life out of it, I wouldn't have been successful.
And you had a very specialized job. Right. Everybody wants to be the long snapper, punter,
kicker. Until you get the crap knocked out of you, then it's not as much fun.
Or until we're in Oakland, California in 2002. It's
exactly
the coldest, rainiest game I've ever played in.
Yep.
But I did really have to focus on football at that point, not only to be successful, but the mindset that you have to have, you'll get hurt if you don't pay attention and really pay attention to what you're doing. And somehow I was able to compartmentalize.
So You have a career, very successful career in Kansas City, but the one thing that never loses is father time. I played 15, you played 10. Eventually you get out of this game. And I think folks don't always realize it's not the easiest transition, to say the least. Can you talk about yours?
And yeah, it's not. And I remember we had a person who pretty much created the player development system in the league in
Lamont Winston.
Mm-hmm. And him always talking about, well, you have the success, but it's gonna, it's gonna end one day, and you're like, no, it's never gonna end.
Right.
And I can remember being in practice against Dave Zott, who was a longtime offensive lineman in the league. And I'm just flying around. He said, "You just wait." And I said, "No, I'm never going to get tired. I'm never going to get tired. I'm never going to get
sure
old.
Enough.
I'm never going to get old." Sure enough. Yeah, you're right. Father Time. He's kind of mean. He's kind of mean when he gets undefeated. Like Bye.
Right.
Bye is undefeated as well. Oh. But yeah, it was difficult because I wasn't prepared. Had a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Had a lot of opportunity that I could have taken care of. Mm-hmm. But I figured, I'm just going to sit around for a couple of years, and that couple of years ends up being a couple more years.
Right.
And you wind up not being off your couch and being divorced.
Yep.
And, it really throws families into a deep despair almost. And I wish if I could talk to my younger self, I definitely would, give them a little bit more words of encouragement about that. But, if I could help players these days, I'd be more than happy to. I'd always want to tell my story if I could, if they would listen.
Well, and you and I talked about this. This is one reason you agreed to come on, is you've had some difficulties just like me. Unfortunately, I've had a failed marriage as well. It had a lot to do with things I did, and certainly had a lot to do with some things I didn't take care of from when I was younger and how I grew up. And that's not an excuse. I still put it on me because I didn't. But you and I have talked about this a little bit. I forget where you're at with it. But I know for me, for the rest of my life, I will more than likely go to some type of therapy. And I've got no problem with that. I mean, everybody needs to be listened to and be able to work some things out. But I mean, you had some difficult situations. You've been through it. You had some lows. Is anything that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the same therapist for probably going on 22 years, maybe 20 years now, who I see to this day.
Right.
I ran into some substance abuse problems. I'm not afraid to talk about that. And that was hard. And the substance abuse really starts with getting through your week in the NFL.
Right.
It's a very painful sport, and we're blessed and we make a lot of money and everything. It doesn't mean that you don't hurt the worst you ever hurt on Tuesdays.
Right, absolutely.
And, people start self-medicating,
yes,
and they think they're going to be okay, and they say, well, I'm going to stop it and I'll be fine. But, it's not really how it works. And it's not how it works in regular society.
Right.
It's definitely not how it works in the NFL, and a lot of guys are going to go down that road. I wish they wouldn't have to, but they're going to go down it too, and it's a lonely road at some time. I've been to rehab. Got that cleaned up.
Yep. This was for alcohol. Was that correct?
Yes, for alcohol. And being there, you learn a lot about yourself and what the demons are and why you did it. And it's not just for pain management. I mean, everybody likes to be drunk. Drunk is more fun.
Yeah.
But, it really ruined my family.
Right.
And, that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. But at least, I learned some tools to be able to cope with it.
Cope and deal with it. Well, and I mean, you and I have talked a fair amount, certainly throughout the year, certainly much more lately, but your relationship with Rocco, your son, who's a senior, and Shayla, your daughter, who just, I believe, graduated.
Well, she's about to graduate.
Or about to graduate from K-State. Yeah, absolutely. Good relationship with them. I know from my standpoint, I hurt my family as well, and have a better relationship with my boys. It's tough when you kind of have to kind of swallow a little bit of pride of, I did so much in the NFL or on the football field, and you realize that you have some problems that take some help. You talked about rehab. You had a former teammate, we don't have to say his name, but you had a former teammate that basically came into your house and drug you to rehab. Is that correct?
It's correct. I don't know if he'd want us to use his name. But,
right. Yeah. So we'll just say him.
Yeah. Actually drugged me out of my house.
Yeah.
And took him to the airport and you know, I owe him a lot. He knows who he is.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up because I think that's something people don't realize sometimes is the type of relationships that we form in that locker room sometimes. And especially in this day and age. I mean, you and I have talked about it. From my standpoint, for the most part, racism in the locker room does not exist.
No.
It is the most colorblind place I've been. And it should be noted that player was white. And so it just doesn't matter. I mean, you and I have talked about this. I don't look at you as black and you don't look at me as white.
Right.
It's Eric and Kendall. I mean, and it's always struck me a little bit odd. It's too bad, obviously, but I certainly think the example that the NFL's really putting forth right now and showing, I think, is going to help quite a bit. So you move on. You talked about your health. I'm actually 51% disabled myself.
Yeah.
Probably like you, I always say I wouldn't do it any differently. I've lived the dream of a lot of people, but it does take a toll for sure.
Yeah, and my disability arose from more of the mental aspect. Mm-hmm. Now, even though I'm starting to get the normal, I'm 44 years old now. Played a particularly nasty brand of football when I played.
It was physical.
And going against those big Lincoln Kennedy 360-pound
no kidding.
Right tackles. So mine was mental. Due to head injuries. Repeatedly slamming your head into another human being as hard as you can, 60 times a game, not to mention practice and double that for training camp and all that.
It stacks upon itself.
It does, and I don't have a right to complain about it, but it's something I'll deal with for the rest of my life, take medication.
Right.
And, it is difficult, and I lost my relationship with my children for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Which killed me. Right. Had another failed marriage. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to get married anymore.
Right. I hear you.
But things are better now, and I get out and do what I can, and see where things go now.
Now you're involved with the KC Ambassadors, just like I am. Which, for those of you who don't know, that is the Chiefs, former Chiefs. We have a 501c3 charitable foundation. Give a lot of funds to some very needy and worthy organizations yearly, and we do that charitable work on behalf of the Kansas City Chiefs, kind of their goodwill arm. The Ambassadors, to me, is really a pretty neat deal because it's maybe as close as we're going to get to the locker room as we can. Because I mean, some of these meetings the lay people can't come into because there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, just a lot of talk that they wouldn't get because it's our locker room talk.
Right,
but it gives us a sense of community.
It does give us a sense of community, and we almost feel like you're part of the team again because you'll have Chiefs president Mark Donovan come in, or Brett Veach, or somebody and talk to us about honest causes. They're not just in there to patronize us.
Right. No. Absolutely.
And it is nice, and I think the reason why the locker room works so well is honestly dysfunction. It's because what you have in there is 53 guys, 5 on the practice squad back then, most from single parent homes.
Yep.
Most from some sort of substance abuse with their parents, and everybody can kind of relate to each other, and it's a little bit of a controlled madhouse is what it is, and the cast of characters that if they could put Hard Knocks will never do it.
No,
justice. They don't have enough.
You get
time.
a little. No, they don't have time, and honestly, there's not a rating for that anyhow.
Right, but yeah, I fit in well. That was a wild and crazy game.
People will ask me about it sometimes, and I always come up with this, which is, the NFL is a violent game, and violent people don't grow up in Beverly Hills. They grow up in violent neighborhoods with issues, and that's not to feel sorry. It's just that is the reality of the sport quite a bit. I will say this though. I think the NFL, the NFLPA, and all the other, the Trust, Alumni Players Association, Gridiron Greats, they all do a pretty decent job of trying to help us after football, which I think is pretty special.
Yeah, I think they're finally starting to get it a little bit more, that these guys have went through a lot. They're going
Right.
to continue to go through a lot. Obviously, the rules are a lot different now, but it's still ramming your head against another human being as hard as you can
Right.
for 60 minutes. But they have done a much better job with the programs, and that's what a lot of our meetings are about with the ambassadors, is informing us and keeping us in the loop about services that
Right.
we can use.
So, with the sports analogy, I get to a section here now where I call game changer, which is, was there something in your life that you really see as a game changer, or one specific moment that you see, or a few as a game changer that really changed the trajectory of where you're at and what you were doing?
When I was a very young player, a rookie, in River Falls, Wisconsin, and we're down in the science room where
Exactly.
we're reading the periodic table of elements and learning about pass rush and all that. They didn't have to do it, but Derek Thomas, who was my mentor when I first came in, rest in peace, obviously, played with him for 2 years.
Right.
But him and Leslie O'Neal, who also has about 130 sacks
Right.
In the NFL and a very good player that a lot of people don't know about now, would sit there and stay long after my defensive line coach, Bob Karmelowitz, would leave and the other players would leave, and they'd watch me because they said, and then DT would say, the only reason I do this is because you look like you might be worth a vest, So
Interesting.
yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, I mean, having a future Hall of Famer
Right.
sit down with you and basically mentor you and basically tell you that you matter is a
Right.
huge deal.
Right. And I ended up doing it for Jared Allen.
Yep.
Probably could have done it a little better. But and obviously he didn't need my help with the talent portion of it, but he needed my help a little bit with the maturity.
Yep. Which again,
aspect
I mean, Father Time helps us all, because when you look at Jared now, I mean, he's just got his whole life together. But he was on a different trajectory for a while, and he would tell you as much.
Oh, he would tell you very much.
Tell you, yes, he would.
Very much as much. And Jared went through a lot, and people go on Google and look about it with his own substance abuse.
Right.
And getting suspended maybe once or twice. I don't really remember. It doesn't matter now. But I was able to, really take him and put him under my wing and show him how to be a pro. Made him sit next to me in the team meeting room. And as you remember, he came dressed as Michael Phelps. One day, Halloween's coming up.
That, folks, when he says he came dressed like Michael Phelps to the game, lots of guys came different. They kind of came dressed differently each week, but of course this was Halloween. He had a Speedo on, and he had gold medals that were the chocolate gold medal with a ribbon.
Right, with the Phelps. He had the Phelps
and the
cap.
hat. Yeah, and it was special.
Well, basically it was Saturday morning. So on Saturday mornings, if you don't know, that's our walkthrough day, and we go polish up the game plan and everything. And he wasn't in there sitting next to me at 9 after a special teams meeting. And I was like, where is this? Did he get in trouble again? Right. No. So Dick Vermeil ends up getting up, and Dick was a big stat guy and will always give us a bunch of stats for the game. And I guess it's the Chiefs interview room now, our old team meeting room. And all of a sudden the door gets kicked in, these two double red doors that they have. And he goes, does anybody know where the pool is? So Dick just goes, just starts.
I mean, there's no way, folks, that you could not laugh at this.
And Dick's like, everybody get out of here.
And he promptly went and found a defensive line coach and kind of did a little lap dance on him, and it was
Gunther Cunningham.
Yeah, it was a funny thing. I mean, to say the least. But that's the kind of stuff you miss.
That is the kind of stuff you miss.
Yeah.
We played with a guy named Todd Collins, who was a friend of ours. We'd always go every Saturday.
Yep.
And we call him TC, and he's probably the funniest human being you ever want to meet. Yeah, just a good guy. Now, you talk about an eclectic mix of people. Todd's from Boston, Massachusetts.
Yep.
Pocket car at the bar and all that. And Todd got along with the blackest dude in the locker room, and we all thrived. We really did. We had a good run.
We really did. It was a special group, but I think a lot of locker rooms are like that, not just at our level, but at all kinds of different levels. So, we realize that we don't do anything on our own, I think. This section I call the gratitude attitude, which is, being grateful for what people have done in our lives. Is there somebody in your life that you're especially grateful for that you would tell thank you? What would you tell them?
Well, I'm thankful to my mother as a single parent, and she began raising biracial children in 1967, which wasn't exactly in vogue back then, and worked to make sure that I really didn't want for anything. Mm-hmm. We were poor, but she worked her butt off. And then when I got to the Chiefs, I ended up having the same defensive line coach for 8 years, mm-hmm. which really helps from a continuity aspect, just hearing the same techniques and everything over that time. Rest in peace, Bob Karmelowitz. But he really was a figure. My defensive line coach in college, Peter McCarty, as well, was kind of like Carm. Maybe not as wild as Carm was, but
you're right. Carm was an interesting dude.
Carm was, he was a defensive line coach on those 1980s national champion or 1990 national championship team at Miami with the Convicts and the Catholics.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Coach Russell Maryland and Cortez Kennedy.
Right.
And the Rock.
Oh wow, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now you're going back a ways. That's right.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so this is called the extra point. I'm curious, is there something that you either really think is important that we talked about that you would reiterate, or is there something else in your mind that you think would be important to talk about?
I think I'd like to address these social issues today, and I think everybody is, at least they're starting to have the conversation.
Right.
This is not new. This has happened in America for a lot of years. And the Black Lives Matter movement is important, very important, mm-hmm. but there's also a lot of other oppressed people out there. But I just wish that you hear this term on television thrown around so much by players now, microcosm of what life is. And football is a microcosm mm-hmm. of what life is. Never let a win get to your head, loss to your heart.
I would agree.
All those type of things. If people could see how, and I know we've gone over it, but people could see how we got along in that locker room, people would be like, you know what? Maybe this group isn't that bad, or this group isn't that bad. And things like racism aren't inherent. You're not born with them. They're taught.
They are taught.
They're taught. And, a lot of guys, I think, come into the NFL and come into a locker room and it changes their heart and it changes their psyche and how they think about things, maybe where they've grown up, say, in rural Texas, rural Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I just wish that somehow we could bottle that up and share it. And, this is a very important transitional time in our country. And I think the NFL they're doing what they can do right now. Maybe they don't understand it totally. They probably don't have a lot of black and brown people on Park Avenue in New York City. I mean, you got Troy Vincent and some other people that are in high positions. But I think if we foster a atmosphere of more inclusion, I think that will help. And I hope that football and just professional sports in general, college sports, people learn that there's another way maybe to do it. Yeah,
I agree, because something I say all the time, which is if you treat people like they matter, well, then they do matter, and this world becomes a little bit better place. And I don't preface it with if you treat white or black or brown or yellow people like they matter. It's if you just treat people. I mean, for the life of me, I don't get it in some instances. So I think that's a great extra point.
Well, yeah, somebody came and drugged me out of my house, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
I had millions of dollars. Somebody came and drugged me out of my house.
And because of that, quite honestly,
I probably still have.
Yeah, you might not be sitting here today. You might be.
Yeah, you might be.
I mean, it was not a great time in your life. I mean, we didn't talk about this, but you've had some times where you were like, you know what, I don't know. I don't know if I'm real happy about what's going on right now.
Right, and where we're sitting right now, I live way out of town now in Cleveland, Missouri. Great neighborhood, got a bunch of acres. Love riding my zero-turn mower, which I showed you on the way in, and have my dog. And I really am at peace. My son's a senior, watching him play every Friday. watching my daughter Shayla getting ready to graduate in May from Go Wildcats. I know that's near and dear to your heart.
My son graduated there as well.
Hopefully, Rocco might have a chance. Looks like he's going to have a chance to go on and continue his career. And K-State's been in one of the schools that's looking at him, so that's exciting. Get to help him with his recruitment. I go out with him and work on the field before practice, sometimes after practice. Try not to interfere too much because I don't want his coaches to feel.
Well, yeah, no, I understand.
Intimidated. It's not my place, but things are definitely better.
Yep. Can you get the edge on him, or is he able to get back and block you?
No, he hit me in the chest. I was blocking him because he was everything offensive line, left tackle last year. But now they moved him more to defense, and I'm teaching him a move. It's a long arm move on pass rush. You've been an offensive lineman.
Right.
And I didn't have shoulder pads on, which didn't matter. But he stuck that thing and hit me in the chest.
So he's heavy-handed.
Oh, he's really heavy-handed.
My son Drake helped in the off-season program with Blue Valley West this year, and he specifically talked to me about Rocco and just said he's just such a sudden athlete. I mean, how he looks, how he walks, how he runs is just on a different level. And I mean, he said he's there now, and that it's obviously it's got to be fun for you.
Well, those are kind words, and I know your boys like they're my own.
Right.
Watch them grow up, and the thing with Rocco is he tore his ACL in the playoffs in November of last year. Worked so hard to come back, ended up having to have another little cleanup. And I don't want to say thank goodness for COVID, whoever would say that.
Right.
But the season being postponed a little bit gave him
allowed him
a
extra time.
A little bit of a buffer.
I didn't even think about that.
Because the reason why you see all these athletes getting hurt these days is because they didn't have a chance to practice. And people, you don't understand. I don't care what level of football you are. You have to learn to run like this when somebody's on your back. And
you're putting different pressure on things that you can't simulate it. And they talk about being in football shape, and you can't be in football shape unless you're playing football.
Right, that's
We're doing those terms.
It's the only way to learn it.
Right.
And when you see people like when Khalil Mack went to the Bears last year and he came out on that Monday night game and had 4 sacks, well, God spent a little extra time on
on
him.
And ends were meeting like a
ends were meeting. Yeah. And it's not like that for everybody. I don't think I really would have survived or thrived in my career had the rules been like they are today.
Right.
With the one training camp practice every day, and it sometimes is not a practice, and
it's hard to imagine.
You
have to realize. I was with Ditka for 3 years, and Vermeil. I mean, we talked about Vermeil, jokingly as dog years. For every year for him was like 3 years with somebody else. I mean, he believed in long, hard practices.
But I told him this, and Dick and I speak every week, and I told him this. I said, Coach, you really saved a lot of people's career by making us practice like that. Now, we might not have liked it.
Right.
But not a whole lot of people on our teams got injured. Not a lot of whole people, with all these soft tissue injuries and everything. Every time you turn on the television now, on the bottom line, it's Achilles, ACL. It's a product of, this year it's definitely a product of COVID.
Right.
But it's going to continue to happen, so the NFL is going to have to, I think maybe when they work through some things, they're going to have to look and study that.
Okay. So one last thing, and then we'll go. I know we got time, but you talked about Rocco playing football. Blaze, my oldest son, played football at K-State. Drake played at Pittsburgh State, then tore his shoulder up after tearing his knee up in college or in high school, so he had to let it go. Because people always ask me, well, you've got injuries, you've got your head stuff. I've got, I'm 51% disabled. They always ask, would you let him play? Case in point, we obviously do. I think the game's as safe. I mean, I think they're working at it. And I think it can be played safe. And ultimately, I never encouraged or discouraged my boys from playing. It's just I wanted them to do whatever they felt they wanted to do.
Yeah, I definitely. Well, obviously, I'm going to let him play. His mother isn't the most thrilled about that because honestly, it was an issue of why we are not.
Right.
I'm not currently living in Overland Park and living in Cleveland, Missouri.
Yes.
But just the helmets alone Oh my goodness! And it's still your brain stopping instead of your head. But
right,
you compare our helmets to
it's night and day.
It's night and day. It's. I think they've done a good job stuff on the kickoffs. And I know something you appreciated moving the guys.
That did not bother me at all.
Off the center with the extra points.
Yep.
I would. I know a lot of moms are scared, numbers are down, and everything. But football really teaches you about life. I think more so than other sports.
Right.
I really do.
And ultimately, what I always say, and I think you'd agree, which is some folks, if they ultimately say, no, I don't think the risk is worth it, I don't want to play. Yeah, I get that. I think that's a plausible argument. Yeah. People ask me, and I tell them how I feel.
Yeah, and Rocco had an opportunity and has an opportunity. He's a very good lacrosse player as well, because we're East Coast people, went to Maryland. But he's predominantly put that down now.
Right.
And, I mean, he's not the small. He's 6'5", 240.
Right. He's put together.
I was only 227 the day I got to Maryland.
Right. Wow.
And he's played 2 games this season and really had a lot of success. Plays in 3 technique, which is over the guard for the layman. And just it's a sense of pride.
It's pretty cool, no doubt about it. Yeah. So, well, as always, you are a good friend, and we've been together for a long time. It's nice to even get more reconnected through things we're doing through the ambassadors. So I appreciate you coming on today. It was my pleasure. A great place here. And for all of you out there, I'm Kendall Gammon. He's Eric Hicks, and this has been The Extra Point.